My name is Vichet Chum. That's V like the letter V and Chet like Chet Baker. He, him, his. And I'm coming from New York, which was formerly the lands of the Lenape people. And an interesting thing about me is that I can flip my eyelids. I won't do that presently because I don't want to terrify anybody, but I can do that. So, yeah. So I've had so many experiences in the theater that I would love to relive. I'm also a very sentimental human being, so I could relive so many. But one that really sticks out to me and one that remains the most important moment in my career. It was a really special experience, and specifically because Merrimack Repertory Theater is located in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is home to the second biggest population of Cambodian-Americans in the country. And so sort of the synthesis of subject matter and community was just so perfect. It was a story, just to give a little bit of context, the story is about a first-generation Cambodian-American male who is sort of navigating his legacy of survival and tragedy. His parents are survivors of the Cambodian genocide. And so it was a story that was so recognizable, and it was so easily connected and accessed by that community in Lowell, Massachusetts. And so it was a really robust schedule. I would, have a matinee during the day, and then I would have a performance in the evening. But then I would do a lot of community outreach. I would do a lot of the in-between work of going out to different community centers and meeting the members of Lowell, Massachusetts, and specifically the Cambodian population. Because for me, it was really important that the community knew that I was committed to them more than I was to the product. Because I think sometimes regional theaters will program sort of like the Asian play or, the diversity ticket. And foremost for me, community is as important as the end game. And so for me, I really wanted to make sure that the community knew that I wasn't going to go away, that I was here for them, and that my story reflected their own experiences. So it was a really amazing experience. And just as it being a personal story, a somewhat autobiographical story for myself, I've never more experienced the actual truth that art is healing in my own personal life. In the play, I had the opportunity to portray a version of my parents who are survivors of the genocide as well. And my parents came to the show. And it was the first time they had seen the play, period. And if I really took in the magnitude of all the things that were happening in that one moment, I think I might have just lost it, or I would have been totally crippled by the bigness of it. But ultimately I performed it, the lights went up, I took a deep breath in, the lights went down, and then I was done. I mean, it was a truly transcendent experience. And my parents and I have never been closer. And we were able to step away from that performance and really talk. Because in that moment, I also realized that my parents were able to see me at the very center of who I was. And that was deeply powerful. So yeah, I mean, I would love to relive that. And I would also be terrified to relive that again. But I would say that was one experience that I think that it was completely invaluable and something that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Three things that I would absolutely love to take from that experience and throw that into every theatrical experience I step into is, number one, the fact that the theater took my lead. They really followed me through this process. Something that I really wanted for that show was for the pre-show speech to be bilingual, for it to be both in English and Khmer, the Cambodian language. And they were like, yes, absolutely. We know X amount of people who could do that. And so I was really grateful for the fact that they really wanted to know how I wanted to create that experience within their theater. And oftentimes, you know, those things they're not synced. Sometimes the timelines are very different. Marketing decisions are haphazard and are after the fact. But for this process, you know, from the get-go, they wanted to know what I wanted my show to look like, what it wanted to feel like. So even with the marketing, they used a photo of myself from the very first trip to Cambodia that I ever went on. And, you know, so the whole thing felt very intimate. It felt very textured and very personal. And I think that theaters could really learn from that experience, from really following your artists and how they want to sort of articulate the experience to their audiences. I would say my second thing is, even though it was totally daunting and exhausting at times, the robust schedule was something that I think I would want to emulate in another theatrical experience. Of course, following the guidelines of, you know, union rules and whatnot. But I think, again, like what I was saying earlier, community outreach is not just a buzzword. It's about getting to know your neighbors and getting to know your audience and building those connections, not for a capitalistic reason of like, come see my show and then we're never going to talk again. But if we really believe in the virtues and the tenets of theater, if we believe that it can build relationships and community, then we have to get in there and we have to know our people. And so something in that experience that they really let me do was get to know people and spend as much time as I desired to really get to know community leaders and to dine with people, to know them on a personal level that has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to come to my show. Because again, like I said, for me, community is as important as the end game. The third thing I would say is the follow-up. So Merrimack, my solo show was my introduction to this theater. It was the first thing I'd ever done at that theater. And oftentimes, you know, a theater, like I said before, a theater will program a show that feels like the diversity ticket and then move on. And that to me is like, that's not a theater that I believe in. And the theater, because it was such a intuitive relationship that we had, they asked me back to the theater, and not to do another Cambodian play, but the season after my solo show, they asked me to do a Regency farce, and then also act in a new play that was an adaptation of a Jack Kerouac novel. So to me, what that theater was doing that was really powerful was saying to its community that they were committed to me as a Cambodian-American queer artist and committed to the Cambodian community as well in Lowell, Massachusetts, to say, we know that this relationship works, and we know that this person is not just the one show that you're going to be able to come see. We want you back. We want you back at that theater, and we want you to see how complex and how broad of a scope Cambodian people actually are. Not just the narrative of a first generation Cambodian-American, but that this Cambodian-American actor can play a Regency era English, you know, comic fool, and also whatever part that I played as well. And so I think the follow-up is really important. The follow-up to your artist and the follow-up to your community, that it doesn't end with just the moment the curtain drops and the run of the show is done. But what are your commitments to the people you invite into your theater? I think that was something that I would really carry with me to the next theater. experiences I've had where I've had an existential crisis and thought, I should not be doing this. But I will say one that really sticks out in my mind was when I had the opportunity to play Song Lilling in M. Butterfly at a regional production. I'm not going to name what theater it is, but I will say I quickly became aware that they wanted me as an actor and somebody who said the lines and then moved on. And they didn't want my entire artist self. They didn't want my politic. They wanted an actor who would say the lines and fulfill the part. And for me, there was just no way that was going to happen, because I think that every artist steps into a process with themselves fully. And for me as an actor, and the reason why I stepped into writing as well was because in this experience of doing this play as an actor, I became aware of how confined I felt when somebody just thought of me as a person on a stage who was just saying lines. And, you know, there are a lot of things going on. There's a little bit of orientalizing the story in a way that made me feel like they wanted the brochure pictures, but they didn't want the actual politics of the play. They didn't want to have the really tough conversations of what it means to have a naked brown person, a brown queer person in space. And so there was a lot of pushback in things that I was bringing up that were really uncomfortable. And so that really made me question the capacity of the actor, you know, and I believe in the craft of acting. I love actors. I still perceive of myself as an actor, but I knew that I knew this experience was going to take me farther, and that acting was not going to be the only thing that myself could do. I wanted to be in charge of the narrative. I wanted to be in charge of spaces. I wanted to be able to create a more equitable space where there were more diverse voices and where people felt collaborative. And in that experience, I did not feel like that's what was asked of me. And so that was an experience that was both really negative, but also really formative to my process. There is a certain level of, yes, as an actor, you're not in charge of that space to a certain degree. And so it's challenging because I felt like I had little power to to navigate the conversation. But I will take personal responsibility. I will say the things that I could have done, which is, I think that I could have, even though I was pushing hard against certain things that were happening, I think that I could have pushed even harder, to be totally frank. I think that sometimes I am perceived as a pretty warm person, and I can laugh in the same sentence as saying something pretty cutting because that's just who I am as a person. But I think that there were certain moments in which I could isolate that I knew that conversation could have gone farther. And I could have really tried to interrogate why that person was saying the thing that they were saying about the part that I was playing. And so I think that I could have done that. And then I could have also gotten a better sense of what the community was feeling. And I mean that in that I wish I had built better relationships with the other cast members and the other creative people in space to just build a bridge of communication to where I could get a better sense of like what the consensus was in the room. At times I felt like I was very much in a silo, and a challenge that I was up against was the theater company has a resident acting company. And so there was a built-in solidarity among those members. And I was absolutely the one of two actors who was coming into that situation. And so I was already the outsider. And then I was also already playing the part that was probably the biggest personality in the room. And so I was up against a lot. But at the same time, I think that I could have built those bridges built those bridges to really understand and to see how other people were feeling in the process. That's definitely something I wish I had done. And then this is my last response. And this to me is probably the more important response, even though I do take personal responsibility. I think I would also challenge the room itself and the theater to what they could do better. That was not my responsibility. I say that in terms of like who's inviting people into this space to create this play. It was very clear to me that there weren't a diverse group of people in this space. And I didn't feel a lot of solidarity between me and people who were higher on the hierarchy than myself. And also because the play is about a Chinese spy who dresses like a woman, or dresses like a woman for this play, there were not those voices represented in the space. And that made me feel a certain way, because those people then were not able to lead the conversation or even collaborate or build upon the conversation. The conversation was led by cisgendered white men. And that was deeply problematic. And to me, I think it's really important that whoever is in charge of that space, who's in charge of that room, is collecting the most diverse voices and the most appropriate voices for whatever subject matter we're tackling. And that was something that was not in that room at all.